Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 special. I'm Shereen, Bhan, and we're in conversation with the former Finance Minister P Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV18. You find yourself with some unusual and unlikely allies in the form of the former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha. The fact that there is a problem with growth is now documented and widely acknowledged. GDP coming in at 5.7% at a 13-quarter low, GVA at 5.6%. The question now is, can we spend our way out of trouble?
I don't think so. I don't think the government has that fiscal space to spend its way out of trouble. If they relax the fiscal deficit target, that would be an admission that the revenues are under pressure, or that expenditure has gone out of control, or that they don't care about interest rates rising, or they don't care about inflation rising. Every one of them will send out bad signals. The answer is not to spend your way out of trouble.
Okay. Let me just take this point forward, because even within the government, and while we still await clarity on whether there will be a stimulus package or not, there is a view that let's not obsess about the fiscal deficit. Yes, the target is 3.2%, but even if there needs to be a little bit of leeway, if we need to deviate by even 0.5%, if that is what is the need of the hour today, then so be it. What would be your argument against that? Because if I were to look at the data going back to the UPA times, I mean, FY09 fiscal deficit of 6%, FY10 6.5%, came down to 4.8% in FY11, FY12 5.9%. So you've seen the perils of profligacy. What would be your argument against a deviation?
Just what I said. I think it's a wrong answer to the problem, just as the repeated stimulus packages in UPA 2 were wrong. I think I'm on record having said that. If you continue with stimulus packages, you will breach all fiscal discipline, deficit will go out of control, inflation will go out of control, and to bring the economy back on track will be a difficult task. This is exactly what I faced when I came back to the Finance Ministry in 2012, but then we had to set a new path for fiscal deficit reduction following the Kelkar committee recommendations. And as long as we were there, we adhered to the path. And I've complimented this government on more or less adhering to that path, except for 1 year. If they now go back and instead of 3.2, set the target at 3.5 or 3.7, that'll be a terrible mistake.
Okay, you're saying that that will be a terrible mistake. What to your mind has gone wrong? What would you attribute as the single biggest cause for why we have seen this kind of a slowdown? Because to be fair and to give credit where it's due, when this government came to power, there was a return of confidence, especially business confidence. You know, whether it was liberalizing the FDI regime, drawing back in foreign direct investment, Make in India, Digital India, so on and so forth. There was a lot of flourish with which the government moved on economic matters. What do you believe has gone wrong?
I think the confidence started returning in September 2013. So I don't agree with you when you say it returned only in May 2014. Yes, there was a lot of flourish in the first 12 months of this government. But that's what it turned out to be. These were simply announcements of various things which did not address the underlying weaknesses that were visible in the economy. What are the underlying weaknesses? Of the 4 engines of growth, 2 were sputtering. Private investment and exports were sputtering. Public investment was propping up the economy, and private consumption was helping. After the 2 engines more or less shut down, the 3rd engine also started sputtering. Private consumption declined. But the government seems to have failed to notice that 3 engines were not running. And it was only focusing on 1 engine, the public expenditure engine. And when we cautioned them the economy is slowing down, they went and did demonetization. And when we cautioned them again that the effects of demonetization will take 8 months to work itself out of the system, they went and rushed through a flawed GST. So an economy that was slowing down, because 3 engines were almost dead, you do demonetization, then you rush through GST, this is what you get. And by the time they woke up, when the numbers came out on the 31st of August 2017, yes, 1 full quarter had gone by, and 2 months of the second quarter has also gone by. So unless they now acknowledge that 3 of the 4 engines are not running, and take steps to restart those engines. Exports have restarted.
Yes.
Restart those engines. I'm afraid spending your way out of trouble is not the answer.
So what would be the way to address the problems that you've just articulated for us? And I know in the past when I've asked you this question, you've said it's the government's job to act and it's the opposition's job to put concerns on the table. But just like Yashwant Sinha said that he must speak in the spirit of national duty, let me try and invoke the spirit of national duty in you, sir, and ask you, how do you revive these engines of growth? What is it that needs to be done today?
Mr. Yashwant Sinha, in his article yesterday, did not, in fact, decline to make any positive suggestion.
Yes, yes.
So you can't ask me the question, which even Mr. Yashwant Sinha declines to answer. And I'll tell you why. Unless you have full information. I don't have full information about the tax collections, net tax collections. I don't have full information about the CBDT's estimates of direct tax collection for the rest of the year. I don't have full information about the CBEC's estimate of net indirect tax collections. I have no access to how the Reserve Bank sees the foreign exchange reserves moving up or down. The Reserve Bank is also accumulating reserves, it's taking forward positions. So I don't have all that detail. The only person who has all that information is the finance minister. So the person sitting on that chair, I'm not saying this as a point of argument.
Sure.
This is the fact. The only person who has all the information is the finance minister, and he should answer.
Okay, so
he can try out suggestions,
sure,
and we can respond to the suggestions.
Okay, so I'm not privy to all of that information either, but let me ask you about the ideas that are being talked about. One is PSU bank recapitalization and the kind of money that will be required they don't have that money. The possibility of recap bonds on the table at this point in time. Now the clamour that the government should actually do something bolder and look at bringing down ownership in public sector banks. Of these 3, do you believe that higher recap is probably going to be a way to try and alleviate some of the pain?
See, I think this government messed up the NPA problem. They created an enormous scare about NPA. We had an NPA problem in 2002. We had another in 2007 or so. But we dealt with the problem by empowering the bankers. Here they have scared the bankers out of their wits. Having messed up the NPA problem, they don't know how to deal with it because it's becoming worse every week, every month. Please remember, they have sent 40 of India's top companies to bankruptcy resolution. I read that they're lining up another 50 companies for bankruptcy resolution. All that will add to the NPAs, not lessen the NPAs. So I don't even know whether this government has a plan of action. The answer to the NPA problem is to empower the bankers to go and collect the money. Quietly, if you had simply sent those instructions, they would have resolved it substantially, as they did on the last 2 occasions. Anyway, that's something they'll have to deal with. Now, what is the answer to capitalizing banks? They don't have the money. Now, we're talking about raising bonds. Who will raise those bonds? Who will guarantee those bonds? Will they be government bonds? If they're government bonds, they will add to the fiscal deficit.
Yeah.
And the third is privatize the banks. Assuming that you are willing to buy a bank, have they created a climate of opinion in the country that public sector banks can now go from government control to private control? They must first educate the people of this country, create a climate of opinion where the people accept. Because today, if you take a straw vote among common people, majority will say, no, we must have government banks. We have no objection to a private person starting a bank. But why should private banks be handed over to government banks be handed over to private
sector?
banks?
Yeah.
So they have not done that either. So I think they are between a rock and a hard place. Let them tell us what they're choosing, the rock or the hard place.